Indeed, I think she was murdered. I don't have any evidence at present, but the reason why I believe that she was murdered is that her death is strikingly similar to the death of Jimi Hendrix, who we do know was murdered by British intelligence. And of course, Jimi Hendrix was murdered for two reasons. Number one, he was interested in cooperating with the Black Power movement and funding it, which is also one of the reasons why Sam Cooke was murdered, because he was interested in funding Dr. King and Malcolm X. But Jimi Hendrix was also murdered because he wanted to leave his label and go independent. He wanted to drop his manager, so that ultimately spelled his demise. Whitney Houston, although I don't know what she was personally planning or anything like that, but she hadn't made a hit in a long time. She had just had an album that didn't really sell well. Is it possible that she wasn't content with the marketing that went into her last album? Is it possible that they deliberately sabotaged her last album as they did Malcolm X to put her into debt, so she may have to do several more albums with
Michael Jackson?
It was stated that Clive Davis, who Whitney Houston made rich, didn't commit any funds to her memorial. Although he spoke, I thought it was interesting that he didn't put up any money. And then I look at the fact that she died the day of the night where she was supposed to go to his pre-Grammy award party.
Yes, indeed. Sam Cooke was one of the first major assassination victims by the secret society of the American music industry. We must keep in mind that white supremacy is run by its educated elites, just like the black community is run by the talented tenth and its educated elites. The difference between the secret societies and the educated elites of Europeans and those of Africans is that they work in the best interest of white people, and our educated elites work in the best interest of white people also. That's the problem. Now, Sam Cooke was one of the first major black music artists to own his own masters. He owned the masters to his own music, which was something that was unheard of for a black artist in his day. Sam Cooke was very, very politically conscious. He was a good friend of Dr. King as well as Malcolm X. In fact, one of the reasons that Sam Cooke was murdered is for the same reason Michael Jackson was murdered a few years ago. Both Michael Jackson and Sam Cooke threatened the white music industry's control of black music artists because both of them were trying to build a massive black music publishing house that would draw all of the major black artists to them and keep all of the money within the race. That was Sam Cooke's dream. It was also Michael Jackson's dream. But one thing that Sam Cooke did that really frightened the powers that be and made his death all the more important for the maintenance of white supremacy is that he had volunteered to finance the work that Dr. King and Malcolm were supposed to be doing together once they had agreed to join forces. Sam Cooke told Malcolm X and Dr. King that you do not have to worry about getting financed by the NAACP, the Urban League, or anybody else. The money that I make from my music company and from my own publishing and from my masters, I will use to bankroll the civil rights struggle. So the civil rights struggle under Malcolm and Dr. or the human rights struggle under Malcolm or Dr. King was going to be independently financed by a black man. That is very dangerous because when you study the civil rights movement of blacks, it was largely financed by white people. Even revolutionary groups like the Black Panther Party of yesterday, whom I hold in high esteem and who are some of my heroes. Although they were not Pan-Africanists, I respect those brothers for what they did. But they were also financed in part by white philanthropy. So what Sam Cooke was about to do was take black movements off the stranglehold of white philanthropic financial support. And so he had to be killed. And so,
well, first of all, the most tragic thing about the Gaddafi assassination is I think it was the first major political assassination of the 21st century that in the minds of most Africans globally, here, there, and everywhere, reminded them of the assassinations of Patrice Lumumba, Steve Biko, Amilcar Cabral, Dr. King, Malcolm X, Medgar Evers. It was the first assassination that really hit home with Africans globally that I think, unfortunately, reinforced the fear that we have of white supremacy. That assassination put more fear in African leadership, Caribbean leadership, and Black American leadership than any assassination since Steve Biko and since Dr. King before him. That's the downside of that assassination. That killing is going to make Black leadership back up so much that we're going to definitely have to look to more young radical leadership as we move forward in this next decade. Because when Al Sharpton, Tavis, Cornell, Martin Luther King III, possibly Minister Farrakhan, once they heard of that, what happened? Many of them backtracked. Now, of course, some of them are elders now, so I really wouldn't expect them to be involved on the out front as much as I would if they were a little bit younger still, okay? But that reinforced the fear that Black people have. Now, the one thing that it did show us is that white supremacy has almost reached its final stage. It's important that we recognize this. This is why we got to get to work. That assassination, as blatant as it was, clearly shows us the arrogance of white supremacy. In killing Gaddafi, who was the only quote-unquote second or third world leader who probably had the capacity to stand up to America other than South Korea or North Korea, okay, showed Black folks that we ain't scared of y'all. Don't you even think about organizing? And if we catch any of you trying to dismantle or undermine white supremacy, you will be dealt with the same way Gaddafi was, who was the most powerful leader on the continent. So
what did Marcus Garvey say? Some of us are going to die. You get up to do this work, you're going to die. But he said, that ain't the problem, that you might die. The problem is we ain't got nobody to replace you. Dr. King died in 1968. He had his faults. Dr. King wasn't perfect, but he was damn sure committed, at least in the final years. Who got up to take King's place after he died? Nobody. Look at us, yo. What, we 45 years after King? You ain't get nobody significant yet. Who, Jesse? Al? Who you got? 45 years and you still ain't get a replacement for King. 50 years you ain't get a replacement for Malcolm. Damn near 100 years you ain't get a replacement for Garvey. 50 years you ain't get a replacement for Medgar Evers, who we always conveniently leave out of the discussion. He was the first one to do it. Marcus Garvey said, leaders must die, but you must have others to replace them. The problem with the Black community is we don't groom our next generation of leaders. We go to church and pray for the Christ to send us one. Interesting theory on Malcolm's death. James Farmer of CORE. Y'all know Farmer because y'all saw Great Debaters. He's a little fat, chubby kid in Great Debaters. But he grew up and he started the CORE movement, right? Congress of Racial Equality. Guess who he said killed Malcolm? James Farmer of CORE suggested that Harlem drug lords and the international drug trade dealers killed Malcolm, not necessarily the FBI and the CIA. Allegedly, he met with a woman while he was in Ghana a couple months before Malcolm was killed. Farmer went to Ghana, and he met with a woman. I don't know if it was a black woman or a white woman, but he met with this woman. This woman said she needed to talk to him. And he met with this woman in Africa, and this woman in Africa told her that Malcolm is going to be killed, and he's going to be killed by a gang much more stronger than the Nation of Islam. The theory was that Malcolm was speaking so hard against drug dealing and drug use that it may have declined sales. I think the motive is kind of weak, personally. But I do find it kind of interesting that this woman told him that Malcolm would be dead in a couple of weeks or months, and he was. Like I said, I think there was multiple interests in that. I don't think that was no one thing. That was not just the CIA. It was not just the FBI. It was not just the nation. It was not just the gang lords. We know that what? John Ali, chief of staff for the Nation of Islam, was a paid informant. Soon after Malcolm got killed, he contacted the messenger to say, Malcolm done. So we knew that the nation was thoroughly infiltrated. But the theoretical question is what? Can you blame the nation for the agents within it or not? That's kind of the question.
Do you have any thoughts on what you've seen the past few days since his transition?
Oh, without question. The second I heard it, I knew it was a murder. I deduced and concluded that it was a murder because I understood Prince's timeline in immediate past history. In 2014, Warner Brothers asked for a sit-down with Prince to negotiate some future music business together. We all know Prince had went independent several years ago,
after tattooing slave on his face after realizing the type of contract that he was in. He embarrassed the music company so bad that they let him out of the contract, and he started producing his own music from that point forward, but he did not own the masters from his past classical music. And so they called him back to the table and made him the offer of giving him back his masters to all of his past music, Purple Rain and everything else. However, as they always do, Machiavellian style, white supremacy, they asked to be given permission to remaster the Purple Rain album in time for its 20th or 30th year anniversary. So Prince came back and got his masters, but at the same time, as the white man always does, he gives you something only to take something bigger. And I believe Warner Brothers was never sincere about giving Prince his music. They only used that because they knew that was the only thing that would bring him back to the table, was the carrot stick of potentially owning the rights to his historical classic or his past music. But when Prince signed to give them the rights to remaster Purple Rain, he let them back in his life. He let them back in his life. In other words, the slave shackles that he took off a few years ago, he kind of put them back on again. It was a setup from the gate. Get him back to the table, bring him in close enough for us to kill him so we can take back all the music. And on top of that, Gus, I'm not so sure that this whole thing was really about remastering the Purple Rain anniversary album. And I'm not so sure that it was all about getting back the masters from Prince's earlier music. I really believe that what Warner Brothers wanted through this murder was to gain control over Prince's unreleased material, just like Interscope wanted to gain control over Tupac's unreleased material. Could you imagine how much money they're going to make off of releasing new Prince songs? You see, and so this whole thing was about getting the new unreleased music. They know Prince would never give them a part of that. Prince would never cut them in on his unreleased music, so they killed him. And so now they're going to own that Purple Rain classic album. They're going to probably buy back from his family, if they don't downright own, of the masters that they allegedly gave him back. And they're definitely going to steal, intimidate, okay, or simply buy from his estate all of that unreleased music. And for anybody who thinks that this is a far-fetched, it was just announced a few weeks ago that Sony Records, who killed Michael Jackson, Sony Records just bought from Michael Jackson's estate the Beatles catalog. The same Beatles catalog that was the sole reason for Michael's murder in the first place is now back safely in the hands of Sony. I promise you, Brother Gus, within 5 years, if that long, Warner Brothers will own Purple Rain, own all the past masters that they allegedly gave back to Prince, and I'm willing to bet that the family is going to sell them, or they're going to take or steal all the unreleased music. Prince was murdered by the music industry, as was Sam Cooke, as was Jimi Hendrix, as was Tupac, as was Michael Jackson. And what do all of these artists have in common? What does Prince, Sam Cooke, Michael Jackson, Tupac, and Jimi Hendrix all have in common? They either owned their music outright, owned music of other popular historic musicians, or was planning on taking control over their music. So you mean to tell me it's just a coincidence that every major black artist that seeks to control their own music ends up dead from a so-called overdose? First they said he had the flu. Now it's an overdose. How the hell you confuse a flu with a drug overdose?
Michael Jackson, last album was called Invincible. Sony Records killed Michael. Sony Records sabotaged the Invincible album. Why did they sabotage the Invincible album? Because Michael Jackson, and we know he had his faults, but he was a music genius. He owned the rights to the Beatles catalog. Do you know what that means? The most popular white group in American and European history Whenever somebody buys an album or plays a song, Michael Jackson gets paid. Do you know one of the reasons him and Paul McCartney fell out? It's because Paul McCartney told Michael Jackson not to bid against him for the Beatles catalog. We friends. Don't do that to me, Michael. Michael says, excuse me, this is business. It ain't personal. Now, y'all can say what y'all want to say about Michael Jackson. Jay-Z ain't got them guts. 50 Cent ain't got them guts. Lil Wayne ain't got them guts. They don't own their music. But I'll tell you somebody who do. Another brother who got a reputation for being a little confused. The artist formerly known as Prince. When I think it was Columbia had Prince under that slave contract, he tattooed slave on his face. And said, if you don't let me out this contract, I'm going to embarrass the hell out you. No other artist is signed with you. They let him out the contract. And now Prince owns his own music. He don't own a company, though. In other words, he ain't got a distribution for all the musicians. But he do at least own his own music. Look at it. Michael Jackson and Prince. You will call them a flip. And they got more guts than all the gangster rappers put together. So Sony Records sabotages Invincible because if you go into debt, if your album don't sell, you in debt to the major. So now the major said, you got to give us that Beatles catalog because you can't pay. You owe us $50 million. Give us the Beatles. Michael said, I'm not giving you that. It's worth more than that. And he owned half of Elvis Presley's catalog. See, y'all thought when Michael married Elvis's daughter, he was in love. That was strategy. I'm going to marry you and get the catalog. Michael was sharp. Afeni Shakur, Tupac's mother, pregnant with Tupac, went to jail because she was charged with being one of the Panther 21. Y'all remember that? New York City, 21 Black Panthers accused of plotting to blow up federal buildings. Pregnant with Tupac, this black woman, who was not a lawyer, comes into court and defends herself and all 20 of her compatriots against the district attorney. Everybody walked out free. White man wrote a book. He said, I've never seen nobody conduct themselves like that in front of a judge without no experience, pregnant with a baby. Tupac was not born in jail. He was born after his mom got out. But his mother was on crack. And guess who hooked Afeni on crack? A paid FBI agent named Lex McDaniel, whose assignment was to put Afeni Shakur on crack cocaine to destabilize her politically. Y'all don't know who your enemy is. You heard that, black woman? Y'all better watch who y'all dating. Some of y'all sisters in here who progressive, you better make sure you don't get with the wrong brother. He might be an agent. What better agent than somebody they can get you to date and trust and have kids with? People do anything for money, especially us. We done lost our scruples. Malcolm Shabazz. We're going to wrap up on this. I was supposed to meet with young Malcolm Shabazz. I was supposed to meet with him the week after he was murdered. Elders of his contacted me and they said, Umar, we need you to get with young Malcolm. He said, we think that you, given your Islamic background and your Pan-Africanism, you're about 10 years older than the young brother. And he getting his head screwed on straight, but he's still a little, he needs some guidance. You being the therapist, we need you to link with Malcolm Shabazz. We think you might be able to be a good influence. I said, let's do it. Malcolm, one of my heroes. Give a damn what nobody say about him. One of the most courageous and sincere black men we ever had since Garvey. So I said, sure, I'd love to do anything for the grandson of Malcolm. He said, well, you know, a lot of people want to get close to him because of his genetic. I said, well, I'm related to Frederick Douglass. You don't get no more great than that, so we straight. I said, and we're going to keep it undercover. And we played phone tag and tried to get us together. He agreed to meet with me. I said, yeah, I'll meet with Dr. Umar. He was familiar with my work. Then one of the elders called me and I didn't call him back. I got tired of it. I said, I'm going to hit him when I get back. He left me a message that I didn't check till later saying, we ready for y'all to meet. You ready? Let's do it.
Next thing you know, I'm in a hotel room looking at the news, and they said he was thrown off a building in Tijuana or something. So I started doing a little research. They say Malcolm was bringing money from California down to Mexico, cash money, to give to a leader of the Mexican labor struggle. First of all, you don't go from America to no third world country with a pocket full of cash. Are y'all following me? I believe he was set up before he even got on the damn bus. They knew he was coming. And the CIA used the robbery as a pretext to kill Malcolm. Malcolm was working with Cynthia McKinney. He was working on 2 books. The FBI and the CIA messed with him. He's supposed to be going over to Iran for a film conference where he's supposed to talk about negative portrayals of blacks and everything. He was starting to get himself together because, you know, he'd been through a lot, obviously. That whole family been through a lot. So they stopped him from traveling. Somebody stole his passport a couple days before he went to Mexico. The police in New York used to stop and harass him on the regular. All this was going on. He even released a statement where he said that he knew they was going to try to kill him because he was about to finish his grandfather's work. In so many words, that's what he said. I'm paraphrasing. They said he got to Mexico, linked up with the labor leader. They ran into 2 women who told them to let's go have some drinks in the club. That's why I don't do no damn clubs. Tupac got killed, going to a club. Biggie got killed, after a club. Malcolm Shabazz had a I don't drink anyway, because I might like it, so I don't even want to try it. Some of y'all be messed up. I'll be like, damn, what's that? I'm scared to drink. I might like it. I don't need no addictions. I got to treat the addictions. So they went in the club, the bar, started having some drinks. They say the waiter came to Malcolm and said, y'all owe us $500. And Malcolm said, we ain't ordered $500 worth of drinks. And at that time, they said they started beating him up. But they let the labor leader get away. Where is he at? And why he ain't spoken? Did you set up young Malcolm to get killed? So they beat him to death. And did you know that in the bar, they just so happened to have all the cameras not working? FBI. Thugs don't operate like that. Then, that was the first story, that he got beat up in the bar. They threw him out on the street. Second story, he got beat up in his hotel room, and the labor leader was in the room next door and heard him get beat up, but didn't do nothing about it. He said, I heard him stomping him and beating him, and I heard him screaming. But he never went and got no help. They didn't even try to help his friend. And then they said they threw him out into the middle of the street, and then that's when people came by and noticed who he was and called the authorities. That's the second story. Then the third story said he got thrown off the roof. We don't know what the hell happened. Some people say he was already dead. They just released the story at that time.